Hi everyone, my name is Sang-Wha, and today I will be talking about our research on how university students of East Asian descent in Canada use digital technologies for mental health and how their cultural background affects that usage. This is work done with Shalini Mohan and Joanna McGrenere at the University of British Columbia. According to research on mental health, there is a growing sense of crisis among university students, and the COVID-19 pandemic has only heightened their stress, depression, and anxiety. To address this crisis, there has been an abundance of digital technologies like mobile applications and websites targeted towards helping users understand, manage, and treat their mental health. However, how these technologies are used and perceived by North American university students who do not align with the dominant Western understanding of mental health is not well understood. This is in spite of current counseling research and guidelines that work to tailor practices towards multicultural perspectives. In this study, we wanted to understand students' existing perspectives and practices around the use of technologies for mental health so that we could identify opportunities for inclusive designs that sensitively take into account their cultural upbringing. We focus on students of East Asian heritage in Canada who make up one of the largest visible minorities, yet underutilized mental health services among the broader student population. Therefore, the research questions we wanted to answer were, how do East Asian university students in Canada use and perceive technologies for mental health, and how does their cultural background influence their use? To explore this question, we recruited both international and domestic students, 20 in total, of East Asian descent in Canada, spanning generations 1, 1.5, and 2. Each student completed an in-depth, semi-structured interview held over Zoom, and, in a style similar to speed dating, we also briefly prompted them from their impressions of apps that we systematically put together to cover a broad range of functionalities. This is so that we could more concretely identify design opportunities and challenges. I will now move on to highlight some of our key findings, which emerged from our thematic analysis. The underlying challenges that our students face in using technologies for mental health stem from communication and cultural challenges they've learned while growing up in their heritage cultures, whether it be in Canada or Asia. These include rarely talking about mental health at home due to stigma or language barriers. For example, our students found it difficult to communicate complex thoughts and ideas, especially with parents who have limited English abilities or do not understand Western concepts of mental health. Another challenge is due to their culture-bound fear of burdening loved ones with negative information. Growing up in this environment where mental health is not talked about has led some students to feel that by the time they start university, they have a very limited ability to communicate how they feel and how to find help. One said, "In Canada, it's all about you need to advocate for yourself, and you need to be responsible for yourself, because no one's going to know what you're going through if you don't explain it." That was my biggest struggle, still is actually. I'm still learning to be a self-advocate. To help cope with mental health challenges, our students sought social support online, leveraging others' experiences to learn about what mental health is and how others are experiencing it. One approach that stood out strongly was that they leveraged the stories of others to learn the skills to communicate their mental health and also be empowered to advocate for themselves with valuable contexts. One said, "I'm not ready to be too forward about my mental health. I think for us Asians, reading others' stories can help normalize talking about it without it being too scary and too direct. But finding relevant stories across all the social media platforms they engage in can be challenging." Our participants also talked about representation and cultural sensitivity in the technologies they use. Here, we found interesting differences between how international and domestic students prefer cultural support. International students wanted to be surrounded by people with similar backgrounds to alleviate cultural shock in a new country. For domestic students, on the other hand, growing up as visible minorities meant they had a nuanced understanding of cultural support. One said, "I think Asians like us have a tough time here. We're always trying to assimilate, to fit in, so I think an app should be mindful of not othering us too much." As for mobile applications, most of our participants pointed out that they hold a lot of promise, but they still pose significant challenges. They discussed their main goals for wanting to use them: to gain independence and self-reliance. This is because they don't want to burden others by spreading negativity, and also because they learned they couldn't rely on their family members and others in their culture for their mental health, only themselves. However, our participants highlighted the main challenge with using mobile applications: the assumption that they need to pass some threshold of knowledge to begin using them. One said, "A lot of the apps I've used and seen are very demanding in what they wanted, but oftentimes I don't know any of these things, Like, I don't have experience talking about these things. I don't have parents who ask me about these things." They also mentioned that apps are missing key functionalities that can help users like them learn to be empowered to effectively communicate and be an advocate for their needs. Based on our findings, we came up with a set of design implications that are more inclusive of our participants' experiences. Mainly, design should support mental health literacy by being more mindful of the different entry points of students, with particular attention to those whose backgrounds lead to a very limited understanding of mental health. They should not only focus on supporting specific practices to help them cope, but also teaching a more well-rounded understanding of mental health, including how to communicate and how to be more empowered so that they can learn to be a self-advocate for their needs. One promising way is to leverage the social learning they already engage in by exploring different ways to share and consume stories, but on a more holistic scale. Not just snippets of experiences that can be found across platforms, but a more longitudinal and contextual look into how someone has navigated their mental health, which would then allow users to understand what to expect in their own journey, almost like curating mentorships through other stories. In conclusion, stories are how we see ourselves in other people, and designing for that may help ease the accessibility barriers we've found with technologies for mental health. Our work shows the importance of expanding the design lens of mental health technologies to be more culturally inclusive of different populations. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your attention.